God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Ouvre les portes, let the doors be open. Statements by members, déclaration des députés. The Honourable Member for Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, on April 29th, I proudly attended the unveiling of the Canadian Naval Tribute Project. The monument honors 14 Canadian heroes who put service before self, with some making the ultimate sacrifice in defense of Canada. Thanks to the leadership of Honorary Captain Navy Mark McQueen, Lieutenant Navy Sean Livingston and Mark Phillips, and my former commanding officer, Commander Walter Moniz, Spadina Fort York is now home to our nation's largest flagpole that flies the largest naval ensign in Canada. At its base, 14 panels recognize a diverse but previously uncelebrated group for their contributions and impact on the Royal Canadian Navy. Heroes like Lieutenant Commander Margaret Brooke, who bravely worked to save a nursing sister even though her own life was at risk. Like Quartermaster William Hall, the first Nova Scotian and Black recipient of the Victoria Cross, and trailblazers like Lieutenant Commander William King Lolord, thrice rejected from the Navy until the Chief of Naval Staff intervened. A personal hero of mine, Lord was the first Chinese-Canadian officer and first naval officer of Chinese heritage to serve in any Commonwealth Navy. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be a member of the ship's company and serve at His Majesty's Canadian Ship York and invite all Canadians to learn about this incredible naval project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, to kick off National Youth Week, I was proud to celebrate the grand opening of the Susan Fennell Youth Hub in Brampton South. Supported by more than $500,000 in federal funding, the hub will provide young people in Brampton with a safe and accessible space to connect, learn, and grow. It is an addition to more than $15 million in federal funding for green energy retrofits. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the youth of Brampton for inspiring us with your energy and creativity. You are the driving force behind this project, and we are committed to supporting you as you follow your dreams and build a bright future for yourself and our community. This National Youth Week, let's continue to reflect on the value of empowering and supporting the next generation, because they are our true leaders of today. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, I represent thousands of law-abiding firearm owners who are each approved by the RCMP to legally purchase, own, and use a long gun in Canada. They follow the law, pay their taxes, and enjoy time at the range and hunting in the woods. Earlier this week, the Liberal government introduced another backdoor hunting rifle ban that again targets law-abiding Canadians. This ban will not improve public safety because criminals do not acquire their firearms legally. Over the past 8 years under these Liberals, why has violent crime increased by 32% and gang-related murder doubled? Because the Liberals often help offenders avoid mandatory jail time for gun crime.
Unreal.
Why do criminals selling fentanyl and crystal meth stay in business? Because Liberals give dealers house arrest for dealing death sentences. Why are all three Canadian premiers demanding bail reform? Because the Liberals are soft on crime. Ottawa's priority must be to go after gun smugglers and criminals using illegal firearms. It's hard work, but it will make Canada's cities safer.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Speaker, approximately 1 in 400 Canadians lives with multiple sclerosis. MS can happen to anyone without warning. Canada is home to many world-leading MS researchers. New scientific discoveries, like the research that identified Epstein-Barr virus as the leading risk factor for developing MS, are within our grasp and can change the outcome of the disease. Canada has one of the highest rates of MS in the world. Let's prioritize and fund the research that shows so much promise. Families living with MS are anxiously awaiting the passage and implementation of the Canada Disability Benefit and an EI sickness benefit that takes account of episodic illness. Today, in honor of MS Awareness Month, I'm wearing a carnation to show my solidarity with the MS community. I ask my fellow parliamentarians to join me to support MS Canada's quest to accelerate MS research and legislation that will have a life-changing impact on those living with multiple sclerosis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable.
The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, multiple sclerosis is an affliction that affects thousands of Canadians on average. 12 people are diagnosed with MS every single day. This disease typically strikes people between the ages of 20 and 49, that is, in the prime of their working lives. Struggling to keep a job whilst living with an episodic illness such as MS can be a terrifying and exhausting ordeal for many people. It is therefore essential that employment supports are put in place for all those living with MS. Today, in recognition of MS Awareness Month, I am wearing a carnation, and I urge each of us to continue to show our commitment to all those affected by MS during this MS Awareness Month, but only during this month, but also throughout the year. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in the House today to pay tribute to the Sache-Behr Foundation during this month. The Sache-Behr Foundation was established in 2012, shortly after the death by suicide of its founder's daughter, Sacha Menyukuri, who had lost her battle with borderline personality disorder. Sache-Behr's mission has offered mental health services in French and in English to more than 14,000 family and friends. Its mission is to drive reform in mental health services by raising awareness of the need for prevention, recognition, timely intervention and access to affordable treatment for people living with BPD. I would like to thank the co-founders of the Sache-Behr Foundation, Lynn Coury and Mike Menu, and their team of over 150 volunteers for their dedication and commitment in order to dispel the myths of mental illness, building community and connection, and to bring hope once again to families affected by borderline personality disorder and emotional dysregulation. In the Sache-Behr family, no one is left behind.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverbend.
It's an exciting time in oil country, Mr. Speaker, as our hometown Oilers are second round bound.
Hear, hear.
Round 2 starts tonight in Las Vegas, but I know Ice District Plaza and Joey Moss Pit will be packed with fans in Edmonton. Now, this is a big deal, Mr. Speaker. The Oilers, rather fitting during the week of His Majesty's coronation, have first knocked off the Kings and now going after all his knights.
That's right.
We have 97, 29, 93, take your pick, reasons to get excited about this round. And I can assure you all of Edmonton is behind what many in our country are now referring to as Canada's team.
That's right. That's right.
It's time to leap the other teams in our dust, Mr. Speaker, as we quest towards the Cup. Game 1 starts tonight, and I know I speak for nearly everyone in this chamber when I say, go Oilers, go!
Hey, good job.
The Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Today is a special day for the over 1 million Polish Canadians celebrating Polish Constitution Day. Known as the Constitution of May 3rd, it is the first written constitution in modern Europe and the second constitution in the world after the United States. The Polish Constitution introduced progressive democratic reforms that included a constitutional monarchy and the separation of powers. Here in Canada, Polish Canadians celebrate Constitution Day by gathering in Polish halls and church basements to sing hymns, enact plays, recite poems, and reflect on Poland's legacy of fighting for freedom and democracy. To all Polish Canadians across Canada, I wish a happy Constitution Day and a happy Polish Heritage Month in Ontario. And I join all Polish Canadians in reciting the beautiful words, Witaj maj, trzeci maj, dla Polaków Bogi raj. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Oakville North Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mental health must be a standard part of all perinatal medical checkups. Today, I joined the Canadian Perinatal Mental Health Collaborative along with the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, fellow MPs and community members for the second annual Flores Walk to raise awareness in ensuring that postpartum psychosis and perinatal mental health are identified quickly and treated seriously. I'm proud that the Minister today announced close to $857,000 to support perinatal mental health. Though a number of Canadians have a perinatal mental illness, it's sadly not talked about, and when it is, many support and mental health services may not be there, and there are gaps. Thank you, Jamie, Patricia, and all those who've been a part of bridging the gap and working to make sure perinatal mental care includes mental health care. Let us continue to support Canadian women and their babies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, when my family came to Canada, we chose this country because it was a land of hopes and dreams. That Canadian dream was a promise to the common people. If you worked hard, you could achieve anything. That's what my parents did, and many newcomers to this country. Today, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, that Canadian dream is broken, where 1 in 5 are skipping meals, and 1 in 5 newcomers are wanting to pack up and leave because of the high cost of living. But, Mr. Speaker, there's hope on the horizon.
That's right.
Conservatives are ready to step in and restore the promise of a better tomorrow. We're ready to restore common sense policies for the common people. We will bring home powerful paychecks so it pays to work again in this country. We will bring home lower prices by scrapping the failed carbon tax scam. We will bring home more affordable homes by firing the government gatekeepers. There's a big mess to clean up, Mr. Speaker, but Conservatives, under the leadership of Canada's next Prime Minister, are ready to turn the hurt into hope and restore the Canadian dream for the common people once again. Now let's bring it home.
The honourable member for Yukon.
2 weeks ago, 4 more Yukoners in 3 different communities died from toxic drug overdose. Remote Old Crow is the latest Yukon community to declare a substance use emergency. Families and communities everywhere in Canada are grieving, and chances are that you are part of at least one. In recent years, we have made progress and saved lives, but we are not where we should be. Our approach is incremental when the epidemic is a tidal wave. In the pandemic, we made bold decisions based on the best available evidence. We took risks because we had to, and we worked together, all parties and all levels of government. This toxic drug crisis requires no less of us. We must end the criminalization of those who use drugs. We need investments in prevention, treatment, social supports, and yes, we need accessible, safe supply for those who need it. Every drug death is another toll of a dark bell that tells us there is more we can do. I know my colleagues will stand with me as we contemplate all options to overcome this terrible crisis. As we showed in the pandemic, by working together, we can overcome, we can do better, and we will.
Member for Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, Liberals are out of touch, Canadians are out of money, and everything feels broken. Out of control Liberal tax and spending means Canadians pay more for gas, groceries, and heating, and take more from paychecks to make it impossible to get ahead. Criminals and gangsters terrorize neighbourhoods because Liberals give bail, not jail, for serious crimes. Hostile states threaten Canadians and their families, buy up resources, influence elections while the PM turns a blind eye to the basic dictatorship he admires. He jets to fancy vacations from fancy mansions paid by taxpayers while housing costs for everyday Canadians double and they can't afford the basics. But Conservatives have a plan to turn hurt into hope. We will cut taxes and axe the carbon tax to bring home powerful paychecks and make sure hard work pays again. Keep violent criminals behind bars and combat foreign threats and the costly coalition's inflationary spending to make life more affordable and fire the gatekeepers so businesses can build more homes so Canadians can afford roofs over their heads again. Conservatives are ready. Let's bring it home.
Honourable member for Souris Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians from across the country continue to be failed by this Prime Minister, who has only made their lives more difficult and more expensive. It is time for a change. As Conservatives, we stand for the common sense of the common people, united for our common home, Canada. Our leader is committed to bringing home a country for those who have done the hard work. He will bring home lower prices by ending inflationary deficits and scrapping the carbon tax on heat, gas, and groceries. Bring home powerful paychecks by lowering taxes and clawbacks to reward hard work. Bring home housing that for workers that can afford by firing the gatekeepers and freeing up land to build. Right. Bringing home safety by ending the catch and release repeat violent criminals. And bring home freedom from foreign interference and woke government censorship. It is time to make Canada honored honored and respected once again. It is time for a new Conservative government that will bring home a country that we can all be proud of.
The honourable for Gatineau, l'honorable député de Gatineau.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this 3rd of May, countries around the world is marking the 30th anniversary of World Press Freedom Day. It is a special occasion to celebrate the principles of press freedom and to pay tribute to the journalists who have been killed or imprisoned for simply doing their job.
The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees freedom of the press. But unfortunately, even in Canada, the safety and freedom of the press are increasingly under threat. Many members of the press are regularly subjected to hate, racist, sexist, and other abusive messages. And this is unacceptable, Mr. Speaker. According to Reporters Without Borders, in 2022, a new world record of 533 journalists were detained. Our thoughts are, of course, with American reporter Evan Gershkovich, imprisoned in Russia since late March for carrying out his work. That is unacceptable, and journalism is not a crime. Thank you to Canadian journalists for their hard work, dedication to truth, transparency, and accountability. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member for Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to highlight the phenomenal work of My Voice, My Choice. These women have courageously sought justice through a system that we know is re-traumatizing. And then they've continued to courageously advocate to make sure other survivors have a choice when it comes to publication bans. Currently, there's no obligation to inform or get consent from victim complainants when a ban has been placed on their name. And if they choose to speak out about their own experiences, they can face criminal charges. This is outrageous. I stand with them today as a sexual assault survivor who chose not to go through the legal system, knowing that the system is not kind to victims. As MPs, we have a responsibility to listen to survivors and to reform these systems. My Voice, My Choice advocates have fought tirelessly, and their work has led to the introduction of Bill S-12. They are here in Ottawa with a clear message that we must amend and strengthen this bill to ensure survivors never face criminal charges for sharing their own story, and that they always are given the choice.
The honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, it is my pleasure today to pay tribute to Michel Rochefort, an exceptional man from Salaberry-sur-Roi. So exceptional, in fact, that the city of Salaberry de Valleyfield recently decided to name an arena in honour of this pillar of our community. Well known as a physical education teacher, Mr. Rochefort devoted his life to the development of sports. Mr. Rochefort, you had no idea that all those hours at the hockey rink in a basketball park at the Quebec Games would lead you to get an arena named after you. Little did you know as well, in 1982, when you were a key player in the construction of the Civic Centre, that the very building would one day bear your name. Take it as a well-deserved recognition of your contribution to the sports community in our region over the past 50 years. Every day, families from the Campy-Valence region will go to the Arena Michel Rochefort to play. Thank you for everything, Michel.
The honourable member for Brantford-Brant.
Speaker, yesterday, Maurice Rosenberg, the former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and ex-CEO of the Pierre Trudeau Foundation, stated that Alexandre Trudeau, the Prime Minister's brother, was only involved in the signing of one donation. And to no one's surprise, it was the infamous $200,000 donation from two wealthy Chinese nationals with direct links to the communist regime in Beijing. He then signed the tax receipts not to the actual donors, but rather to an address in China. In his former role, he was briefed daily on foreign interference, yet saw no red flags and found it acceptable by his own standards to send the tax receipts abroad. This is the same so-called ethical and independent professional whom the Prime Minister appointed to produce a report on foreign interference in the last election. It begs the question, Mr. Speaker, what else has this individual swept under the rug?
Exactly.
Hear, hear. Honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This year marks the 11th anniversary of the Sash Bear Foundation's Sash Bear Walk for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention. Starting on May 13th and running through the month of June, the Sash Bear Walk will be held virtually and in 5 in-person locations in British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and Newfoundland. The foundation and annual community fundraiser were inspired by Sasha Menu-Curie, a champion swimmer and an Olympic hopeful who lost her battle to borderline personality disorder because she and her family couldn't get the services and support that they needed. Funds raised from the Sash Bear Walk go towards Sash Bear Family Connections, program which provides the skills for family members to regain balance in their lives and be more effectively involved in the lives of their loved ones with emotional dysregulation. The walk also supports the Sash Bear free educational webinars presented by scientific and clinical experts to provide information and skills to families coping with self-harm, suicidality, trauma, and more. Mr. Speaker, I encourage all members of the House of Commons to visit sashbear.org, attend a Sash Bear Walk in their community, and to work together to provide more mental health resources to those who are struggling. Let's all make waves for emotion, dysregulation, and suicide prevention.
Oral questions, question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah, 2 years ago, Mr. Speaker, CSIS indicated in a report that a member of Parliament and his family were threatened by a Beijing agent because of a vote in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister says that he didn't know, despite the fact that the former head of CSIS said that the Prime Minister's advisor was informed, and even the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister said that nothing is ever hidden from the Prime Minister. So how is it possible that the Prime Minister did not know that this was going on? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition knows full well, the government takes all threats to members of Parliament very seriously, especially from foreign agents. And as soon as we were informed of the issue with the member, we said that we would offer a briefing to him. He accepted it, and this is not the first briefing that the member has received, and we're going to continue to work to protect everyone who works in this chamber, to protect our democratic institutions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Yes, but it's difficult to imagine what information would have been important enough to give to the Prime Minister if the information on the threat against the member and his family were not important enough to give to the Prime Minister. It's impossible to believe that the Prime Minister would not have received such information. So either he did not know and he's incompetent, or he knew and he's dishonest, which is true. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the member for Wellington Halton Hills received a briefing from CSIS yesterday. That's not the first time that he has received such a briefing, and that includes a number of examples of how the government is taking concrete action to fight foreign interference. It is on this side of the House that we are protecting the members of this House, and we're going to continue to do so because our members work hard. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Minister, not for his incompetent minister.
Okay. I just want to remind all the members in the House that when they're asking questions or answering them, to try to be respectful to each other. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, please continue.
The question was for the Prime Minister, and he should have the courage to stand up and answer it. The former head of CSIS indicates that a briefing note with explosive revelations about a threat against the family of a member of Parliament would have been brought to the Prime Minister's top advisors, and his top advisor says everything is brought to him. It is impossible to believe that he was not made aware of these threats 2 years ago when they were documented by his own intelligence services. How does the Prime Minister expect us to believe such a ridiculous claim?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, does the member opposite really think that by exaggerating rhetoric and lobbying attacks at the government that he's doing any service to the member for Halton Hills? Of course the members of this government care for the safety and security of the member for Halton Hills and his family. That's why we provided him a briefing yesterday. It wasn't the first briefing that he received, and Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to do the work to protect the members that work in the space and our democratic institutions.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
If intelligence services would not tell the Prime Minister about this, what would they tell him about? It is hard to imagine something more grave to the security of our democracy than members of Parliament having their families threatened because of how they voted on the floor of the House of Commons. Now, if the intelligence agency is not telling the Prime Minister these things, it's because he is not competent enough to ask for them. So there are two options. Option one, either he didn't know and he's incompetent, or he did know and he's a dishonest. Which is it?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we put confidence in our intelligence agencies to take the actions that are necessary when threats are posed against members in this chamber. As you heard, the member for Wellington Halton Hills was briefed yesterday. He has been briefed on a number of occasions, and it is this government, Mr. Speaker, that will continue to ensure that parliamentarians are getting timely and concrete briefings. We have issued fresh instructions to CSIS on this point so that we can protect the people and the families that work in the space, so we can protect our democratic institutions.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They're not protecting anybody but themselves, Mr. Speaker. The same agent for Beijing that carried out the threats against the family of a member of Parliament is able to do so because he has diplomatic immunity from Canadian laws. If any other Canadian had done this, they'd be charged and in jail, but because the Prime Minister has given diplomatic immunity and credentials to this agent, he's able to act with impunity right here on Canadian soil. And even if you believe the Prime Minister's far-fetched claim that he didn't know about this until Monday, since Monday, he has not kicked out that agent. Why?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid the Conservative leader is inventing the laws around diplomatic immunities. More importantly, it is this government that has introduced new laws to provide CSIS with the powers that are necessary to protect parliamentarians, to protect Canadians from foreign interference. It is this government that has raised the bar in transparency by creating NCCOP and NCIRA. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue to work with all members of Parliament so that we can ensure that they are able to represent their constituencies in a way that is safe and secure from foreign interference.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, I find it at best irresponsible and perhaps even imprudent on the part of the Prime Minister to invoke his own lack of knowledge and to systematically attack the quality, integrity, and honesty of CSIS. Now, heaven knows, as a sovereigntist, that is not a small comment. Now, I would like to know if people are very, very sure that Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Rosenberg, did they know? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, the government appointed Mr. Johnston, a distinguished Canadian, to help the government navigate national security. Mr. Johnson will formulate recommendations with the help of a public commission as needed, and that is another concrete example of how the government has advanced policies and resources to fight foreign interference. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, that's all very well, but let me specify. The Prime Minister said yesterday that he hadn't had contact with the Trudeau Foundation for 10 years. So let's say we're all naive and that's true. But that wasn't my question. Here it is. If ever the brother of the Prime Minister is challenged by the CRA or by another authority or by the committee, would the Prime Minister recognize that he is not qualified to appoint a public commission. The Honourable Leader of the Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister has confirmed on many occasions, there is no relationship between the Prime Minister and the Trudeau Foundation, either direct or indirect, and that is clear. The Foundation is responsible for scholarships, and I think that it is absolutely irresponsible to attack a foundation which is independent. And if the Bloc Québécois leader has questions to put to the foundation, he should do so directly. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. The revelations of threats against a member of Parliament and his family, those revelations are shocking. And the Public Safety Minister is not saying that he knew about this. He's had 24 hours to refresh his memory. Can he tell us when he was informed of these threats? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I must emphasize that there are laws to protect top secret information, and we rely on the counsel of our independent and nonpartisan officials to guide us on decisions regarding information disclosure. Yesterday, the member for Wellington Halton Hills received a briefing, and we're going to continue to work together with all members of Parliament to protect people who work in our democratic institutions.
I don't think the government understands how serious this is. We've got a member of Parliament and his family that are being threatened by a foreign government for the work that he does in this Parliament. That is a problem. That is something serious. This government is not taking it seriously. I've written a letter to the Prime Minister to call all party leaders to deal with this really serious matter. But in the meantime, can this government and can the Prime Minister inform this House if there are any other members of Parliament that are currently the subject of any similar threats?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course we care for the member for Wellington Halton Hills. That's why we have been providing him support through multiple briefings from CSIS, as we care for the safety and security of all of the members in this chamber, the people that support them and their families. That's why this government since day one has been giving additional powers to CSIS to address concerns around foreign interference. I would just pause to note that we're in a different era, Mr. Speaker. This threat landscape has become much more complex. This government will continue to be vigilant when it comes to protecting our democratic institutions and the people that work within them.
Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, in reference to the July 2021 intelligence assessment, the Prime Minister said this morning that CSIS made a determination that it wasn't something that needed to be raised to a higher level. But former CSIS Director Dick Fadden said the assessment would certainly have been sent to the Departments of Public Safety and Foreign Affairs and the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, which appears to have been David Morrison, the current Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Will the government confirm the Prime Minister's assertion this morning that the intelligence assessment never made it out of CSIS?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can certainly confirm that we are guided by the advice that we get from our intelligence agencies, which is strictly governed under the Security of Information Act, as my colleague across the aisle knows. And it's important that we navigate this very carefully, because when we talk about matters that relate to national security, it's people's lives who are at stake. The people who work for CSIS, the people who work within the law enforcement community, the people that work in this chamber, including the member for Wellington Halton Hills. That's why we briefed him on numerous times. We'll continue to ensure his safety and security so that we can protect the people that work within these institutions.
Member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, again, Dick Fadden said today the assessment would certainly have been sent to the Departments of Foreign Affairs and Public Safety and to the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor. And Sherry Henderson, a CSIS Assistant Director, recently testified, quote, "I can say that we definitely have seen specific cases of hostile activities of states against politicians. In those specific cases, we definitely brief our government on the challenges that are being faced." How are we supposed to reconcile these differing and conflicting accounts?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would hope that the member opposite would be able to reconcile that with his own personal experience, which not only within the last 24 hours he received a briefing, but on a number of occasions he has received support from CSIS to make sure that...
I'm having a hard time hearing the Honourable Minister. The Honourable Member for Wellington Halton Hills asked a question which he deserves to hear the response to. So I'm just going to ask everyone to bring it down a notch and listen to what the Honourable Minister has to say. The Honourable Minister for Public Safety, from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying before I was interrupted by the Conservatives across the aisle, the member opposite has received briefings from CSIS on a number of occasions. That is one of the ways in which we are attempting to address the concerns that have been raised around foreign interference. More importantly than that, we have put in place people, resources, new laws, and transparency mechanisms to shine a light on the way in which we are combating foreign interference so we can protect the people in this chamber as well as their loved ones. That is our paramount objective.
Member for Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
The only light that's being shone is by the Globe and Mail on this government's failure to keep parliamentarians informed and safe when foreign actors are threatening them. We heard very clearly from CSIS officials at committee that, quote, in those specific cases, we definitely brief our government on the challenges that are being faced, end quote. We heard from the Prime Minister's own Chief of Staff that the Prime Minister is a voracious reader of all the briefing notes that come across his desk. Are we actually supposed to believe that the Globe and Mail gets briefed by CSIS before the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, those types of absurd suggestions don't advance this debate. Neither does the suggestion that we don't care about the members opposite or their safety and security. As I said yesterday, there are intense debates in this chamber about both foreign and domestic policy. But rest assured that the members of this government will do everything in its power to fight against foreign interference, to protect the members that work in this chamber and their families so that we can defend our democratic institutions. That is something that we should all be united behind.
Member for Leeds Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
But the exact opposite has proven to be true. For 2 years, they failed to inform the member for Wellington Halton Hills about these threats against his family. This is an attack on all parliamentarians. And we've now known based on the reports in the Globe and Mail, that the government knew 2 years ago. So the question is very simple. And instead of the minister carrying on with non-answers, he needs to be very direct. When did the minister's office become aware of this specific instance?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we've been very clear that as soon as we became aware of the specific issue regarding the member of Wellington and Halton Hills, that we took decisive actions. We reached out. We spoke to the member opposite. We offered him a briefing. We made sure that that briefing occurred. It occurred yesterday. It was not the only briefing that the member opposite received. That's because we want to be sure that we can protect him, his family, and indeed all of the members in this chamber so that they can do their job, so that they can represent their constituencies, so that we can defend our sworn obligation to uphold this democracy.
The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, on March 7th at committee, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, "Let me tell you that if we had the slightest evidence of wrongdoing, we would immediately expel the diplomats. The government has known for 2 years that an agent threatened a member of Parliament and his family after a vote in this House. Since Monday, all of Canada knows that this Prime Minister wanted to keep this secret. Is this because it's a Conservative member that the Prime Minister didn't punish the wrongdoing of this diplomat and immediately expel him?"
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, that assertion is utterly false, utterly below the dignity of this chamber. Let me be very clear. Our government has repeatedly stated that we follow the Vienna Convention. If there is any evidence that is brought to our attention that a diplomat is acting outside of the Vienna Convention, we will act upon it because we take the rule of law seriously. We take the rule of law to the core, and we will continue to fight to ensure that not just members of Parliament are protected, but every Canadian is protected from foreign interference.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, the Vienna Convention is clear. They can expel the diplomat right away if they want to, Mr. Speaker, but they're not doing so. They're not doing so. Why? Why? If it's except maybe because they were advantaged by what was happening. That's the reality, Mr. Speaker. What does the Prime Minister have to protect? We want to know. The government has known for 2 years. The public has known since Monday. So when will the Prime Minister finally do the right thing and expel the diplomat in question who bullied our colleague? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Let's just dial down the rhetoric a little bit on this. Let's just dial down the temperature a little bit on this and state very clearly that their government might have operated in the best interest. This government will always operate in the best interest of all Canadians, every member of Parliament, and all people of every persuasion. We will act in due diligence, following the rule of law, following the convention that we have signed. We will take our time and do it appropriately, always, to ensure that Canadians are protected and members of this chamber can do their work as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, the government, the Prime Minister's staff, and therefore the Prime Minister himself knew about the threats against the member for Wellington-Halton Hills, threats against himself and his family, and the government did nothing and said nothing. Regardless of how many questions we ask, the Prime Minister can't come up with a valid reason. If parliamentarians want to be safe and if they don't want their families threatened because they vote a certain way in this House, then we're all at risk. Will the Prime Minister finally apologize to the member for Wellington-Halton Hills in this House now? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I share the concerns of my honourable colleague. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I share the concerns of my honourable colleague, and that is why CSIS offered a briefing to the member for Wellington-Halton Hills, and we have a very strong record in terms of fighting foreign interference with new authorities for our intel agencies, for our public safety community, with new committees to increase levels of transparency, and we're going to build on that record with the cooperation of the Bloc and all members in this House. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Those weren't apologies. A member and his family were threatened. The government knew about it, but kept the information secret for 2 years. Let's just reflect for a minute on how serious this is. In addition, if you read the Globe and Mail, it could be MPs plural. So here are 3 questions. Was the government informed whether more than one member of Parliament was or still is being threatened? Second, has it informed the members in question? And third, if not, is it because the members in question are not part of his party? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker. Order. Order. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, so many questions. But the short answer is that the government will continue to take action against foreign interference with resources, with new mechanisms, with consultations, with commitments. For example, by the creation of a new register. We need to continue to be vigilant in close cooperation with all the members in this House to protect our democratic institutions.
Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, CSIS says that Beijing sees Canada as a high priority target and that its agents are unconcerned about repercussions. No wonder, because under this Prime Minister's watch, Beijing diplomats with impunity have been interfering in our elections and setting up illegal police stations. We now learned that a diplomat at Beijing's Toronto consulate tried to punish the family of a sitting member of Parliament.
Shame.
On what date did the Minister of Public Safety's office first learn of this serious incident?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague opposite raised a number of concerns, one of which is how it is that we are protecting our democratic institutions, including our elections. As he knows, Mr. Speaker, we have set up independent panels, including with protocols, to make sure that we inform Canadians when there are threats, but also making sure that we are vigilant about the threats that occur today, which is why in Budget 2023, there is $49 million for the law enforcement community to protect Canadians from foreign interference. And I sincerely hope that the Conservatives will see fit to support that budget, because that is the way we will protect Canadians from foreign interference.
For St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the minister's non-answer is an absolute disgrace. We can't, the seriousness of this cannot be understated. We're talking about a hostile foreign state who targeted a sitting member of Parliament to intimidate him from doing his job, from being able to vote freely in this place, free of Beijing's coercion. CSIS told committee that they definitely brief the government when they learn of foreign states targeting politicians. So again, to the minister, on what date did his office learn of this most serious incident?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as we said before, the idea that somehow we are not concerned for the safety and security of the member for Wellington Halton Hills is outrageous. That is why we took decisive, concrete action to ensure that he was provided with the briefing yesterday. We will continue to be vigilant on this front, putting in place the resources, the personnel, and the authorities to protect the people that work in this chamber so that we can uphold our democracy.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, our country is a country of law and order, which respects international agreements. So allow me, Mr. Speaker, to read you something that means that Article 9 says that a country under the Vienna Convention says that a country has the power, without having to explain its decision, to expel a citizen or anyone who is persona non grata. Mr. Speaker, here's a simple question. Since Monday, at least all Canadians know that there is a so-called diplomat from China who should be expelled. And why hasn't the government done it yet? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Secretary for Global Affairs informed this chamber that we will leave all options on the table for any agents who may be engaging in conduct which goes beyond.
Order. The Honourable Minister, please continue.
Mr. Speaker, as I was saying, my colleague, the Parliamentary Secretary for Global Affairs, informed this chamber that if any agent representing a foreign government exceeds their lawful authorities and activities here, that we will take whatever appropriate steps are necessary. Canada's record in condemning the actions of foreign and hostile actors is universally well known. We will continue to take the steps that are necessary to protect our institutions.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. He doesn't have the dignity to give a proper response. So we'll have to turn to the Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Vienna Convention is clear. Section 9 gives power to a country to expel any diplomat. Since Monday, all Canadians know that a diplomat from Beijing acted unacceptably towards one of our members. And when one member is attacked, it's all parliamentarians who are attacked, all Canadians. So what is he waiting for to kick him out? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, This is a government who has put the focus on an issue that affects everyone in this chamber, and that is the reason that we supported the member opposite who works for the riding of Wellington Halton Hills. That is why we created new mechanisms, new powers for secret agents, and that is why we are going to work 24/7 to protect everyone in this House and their families, and that is how they can do their jobs.
Canada's failure and neglect is so evident in Grassy Narrows First Nations with the decades of mercury poisoning. Governments knew and did nothing. So Chief Turtle and his nation fought back. 3 years ago, the Liberals finally announced they would build a mercury treatment center. 3 years later, nothing has been built. Neglect once more. Grassy Narrows is doing their part. Why are the Liberals continuing to fail Chief Turtle and his nation?
Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member opposite that what has happened in Grassy Narrows is a national tragedy. In fact, we have to do better, Mr. Speaker, to protect waterways across this country from the kind of toxic poisoning that Grassy Narrows now lives with. And that's why this government has worked with Grassy Narrows and Chief Turtle to build a recovery centre. But, Mr. Speaker, we have to do more to prevent these kinds of tragedies in the future. I'll be meeting with Mr. Turtle and Council this afternoon.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Canadians pay the third highest prices in the world for prescription medicines, and since 2015, the Liberals have been promising to lower costs but failed to deliver. Now, officials from Canada's drug price regulator confirm the Minister of Health stopped them from lowering drug prices for Canadians by billions of dollars. Former board member Matthew Herder testified that Big Pharma knows it can get this minister to do its bidding. That's right. Why are the Liberals putting Big Pharma's profits ahead of Canadians' health?
Yes. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our government and the Minister of Health appreciate the leadership and contributions of the PMPRB. As an independent, quasi-judicial body, the Minister does not provide direction to the PMPRB. And as stated in Section 96(5) of the Patent Act, the PMPRB must consult with various parties, which include the Minister, before issuing any new guidelines. In this context, on November 28, 2022, Minister Duclos sent a letter to the PMPRB, which is available for everybody who would like to see online. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Whitby.
Speaker, my question is to the Chair of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Yesterday, Conservative MPs and Finance Committee held hostage the committee, blocking supports to countless middle-class Canadians. Not only is that shameful, but this obstruction caused our PROC committee meeting to be cancelled. It's at that same committee meeting that we were set to hear from high-level Conservative Party staffer Jenny Byrne as part of our study on foreign interference. Does the Chair not find this highly suspicious, and will the committee address these avoidance tactics by the Conservatives?
Okay, can I... The Honourable Member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Whitby is correct. It's very concerning that Conservative members are filibustering at Finance Committee to avoid Jenny Byrne's testimony. It is essential that Canadians be able to have confidence in our democratic institutions, and that is why all parties agreed.
Order. Order. There seems to be some confusion here. I just want to remind the honourable members to just get up when it's their turn to speak, just a few seconds before, maybe 5-10 seconds before. It just makes the job for the speaker a lot easier so that we don't have the confusion. The honourable, and please, I mean, I know everybody's trying to help each other, but offering advice across the floor is not a good idea. Maybe just help yourselves out. The honourable member for Waterloo from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Whitby is correct. It's very concerning that Conservative members are filibustering at Finance Committee to avoid Jenny Byrne's testimony. It is essential that Canadians be able to have confidence in our democratic institutions, and that is why all parties agreed to prioritize a study on foreign election interference. Canadians now know that the previous Conservative government knew of foreign interference in our elections. Jenny Byrne served in senior roles to both Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the Conservative Party. She was to appear yesterday evening, yet the Conservatives chose using dirty tricks to avoid accountability. Mr. Speaker, they say this is a serious matter, but they sure...
I understand that there may have been something offensive said, but I have no idea what the hell it was. The honourable member for Brantford Brant, because I couldn't hear it. I apologize for using unparliamentary language. The honourable member for Brantford Brant.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Public Safety Minister is misleading the House. He claimed that the RCMP had taken decisive actions to shut down all Beijing-funded police stations. Yet, contrary to this claim, 2 Montreal community groups under investigation for holding secret Chinese government police stations say they continue to operate normally with no closure requests from the RCMP. Why is this minister misleading Canadians, and why won't he shut these stations down?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, with respect, it is the quality of that question that betrays the member opposite's understanding of what we do in elected government and what our police agencies do, which is operationally independent. And it is astonishing to me that the member opposite does not understand that. The RCMP have been clear that when there have been activities associated with police stations that they have taken concrete action, and if more pop up, our expectation is that they will do so backed by the investments, the record investments that this government has put in to keeping our community safe.
Brantford Brant.
Speaker, our democracy is at stake. The Public Safety Minister looked Canadians in the eyes and claimed that decisive action had been taken to shut all of these stations down. This minister has a significant credibility deficit. He has misled Canadians in the past and continues to do so today. When will this minister finally stand up, prioritize the safety of Canadians, stop mocking the Conservatives, and shut these stations down?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, we take this issue very seriously, which is why the RCMP have been on top of it, providing public updates to everyone around the actions they are taking to disrupt any foreign interference which may be affiliated with these so-called police stations. And obviously, if there are more threats along these lines, our expectation is that they will do so. But they will do so in a manner that is respectful of operational independence, and it is quite shocking to me that at this stage in the member opposite's career that he doesn't understand that important democratic principle.
The Honourable Député.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, on our side, we are talking about the facts. Here's the fact. 2 months ago, the RCMP announced that there were 2 police stations being operated by Beijing, one in Brossard, one in Montreal. Another fact, the minister said very clearly that he would take all necessary action to put an end to hostile operations and activities in Canada. Third fact, the public safety minister said in committee on Thursday last week that Beijing's police stations here were closed. Why is the Minister of Public Safety misleading Canadians? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, my colleague should read the updates and briefings provided by the RCMP. The RCMP has indicated that it is taking concrete action to deal with these so-called police stations run by Beijing. They will remain vigilant, the RCMP, with the assistance of investments made by our government. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. But, Mr. Speaker, that's the problem. The Minister of Public Safety is explaining to us what happens with public security in Canada. The RCMP says one thing, the minister says something else. Then the minister comes back and says, well, I don't lead the RCMP. Yes, but he's the minister responsible for public safety. Canadians need to know the truth. Are the Beijing-run police stations in Canada closed or not? Or are they still open, like we heard on Monday? What's the truth? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I have already explained many times, the RCMP is taking tangible action to deal with the operations of the so-called Beijing-run police stations. This is the issue that we have addressed through investments and resources, which are already there in the 2023 budget. I hope the Conservatives will support our budget, which is very important, and will help support Canadians. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, when CSIS informed the Prime Minister in 2019 that a future Liberal MP was supported by China, he did nothing, and he kept it secret. In 2021, when CSIS informed the Prime Minister that an opposition MP and his family were being threatened by China, he did nothing and kept it secret. So in short, the Prime Minister keeps things secret when it serves the Liberals and doesn't serve the opposition. After all that, the same Prime Minister tells us, you can trust my inquiry, you can trust my special reporter, who I appointed and who reports to me. Mr. Speaker, when will there be a public and independent commission of inquiry? The Honourable Public Safety Minister. Mr. Speaker, the reason we can have trust in Mr. Johnston is that he's a very distinguished individual. He was Canada's Governor-General. He was appointed by a former Conservative Prime Minister. He will work in a nonpartisan way on this nonpartisan issue. We are ready to work with Mr. Johnston, and we will follow any recommendations he makes. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, with just 2 days to go before Charles III's coronation and the Liberal convention, Liberal MPs are starting to get vocal. They're saying that the oath to the King is outdated and that it is time to make the oath optional. Mr. Speaker, members of this House should be loyal to the people only. They should not have two loyalties, one to the Crown and the other to the people. They should have one and only one loyalty, and we owe that loyalty to the people. The people do not want any more oaths to the King, no more God save the King. The time is now, and we have a perfect opportunity. Why not sever our ties with the British monarchy once and for all? The Honourable Innovation Minister. I thank the member for his question. I feel that there's a lot of enthusiasm on the other side of the House. But here's the answer, Mr. Speaker. Canadians and Quebecers are concerned about affordability. Canadians are worried about health care. They're thinking about dental care. They're thinking about building the economy of the future, about investments. That's what we care about. That's what Canadians care about. But the Bloc is talking about monarchies. They're talking about monarchies, but Canadians care about affordability.
Minister and this Minister of Public Safety knew 2 years ago that a foreign agent participated in threats to a member of Parliament's family because of his vote in this House. Aside from the member for Wellington Halton Hills, any evidence of any threat against any member in this House should have resulted in expulsion of that agent. Who was asleep at the switch 2 years ago, and who's still asleep this week?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I think by now, and given the repeated nature of the questions we're receiving from Conservatives, they will know that we've taken decisive and concrete action in supporting the member for Wellington and Halton Hills. It was the Conservatives who were asleep at the switch, Mr. Speaker, respectfully. They were asleep at the switch for 10 years when they had the reins of government. They could have introduced new powers for CSIS. They didn't do it. They could have introduced an NCCOP. They didn't do it. They could have introduced an NCIRA. They didn't do it, Mr. Speaker. It was their incompetence and their being asleep at the switch that allowed us the opportunity to do that work, and we will continue to build on it so we can protect the people in our institutions.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Speaker, the government is now trying to hide behind the Vienna Convention to explain its inaction with regards to an agent from Beijing harassing a member of Parliament's family. Let me read it for you. Quote, Article 9, the receiving state may at any time and without having to explain its decision notify the sending state that any member of the diplomatic staff of the mission is persona non grata. In any such case, the sending state shall either recall the person concerned or terminate his functions. Why is that agent from Beijing still in Canada?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, it is increasingly clear, and it has been for several years, that China is a disruptive power. China is having interference in our society. We are very aware of that. We are fighting it every day. We are also very aware of the Vienna Convention. We are very aware of our abilities and our responsibilities under it.
I'm going to have to interrupt. Part of my job is listening to find out what is being said. And if I can't hear it, I can't do my job. So I'm going to ask everyone to take a deep breath, let the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary finish his response, and then we can go from there. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to be extra clear. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs has been clear to her Chinese counterpart as recently as a few weeks ago, when she was absolutely clear that any interference in Canada by any agency of the Chinese government is inappropriate, and we will deal with it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Speaker, for almost 2 years, this government has known that an agent from the communist regime in Beijing has been operating in Toronto. That agent orchestrated a harassment campaign against a member of Parliament because of a vote taken in this House. The government does not need to explain itself. If this does not rise to the level of expelling a diplomat, what on earth would? Why is this government more worried about the feelings of a communist agent from Beijing than on the very foundations of our democracy?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, it is the foundations of democracy that are being well served by the authorities and the investments that this government has made in our intelligence community that the Conservatives never did. They brag about their record when it comes to national security. They talk tough, but they never back it up with concrete action. Mr. Speaker, it is the members on this side of the chamber that are rolling up our sleeves, doing the heavy work, and protecting the people that work in this chamber so that we can protect our democracy.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Granville.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, sexual violence continues to affect too many victims. We know how important it is for police forces to have access to tools such as the National Sex Offender Registry to investigate and prevent sexual violence. We also recognize that the criminal justice process can be daunting and difficult for victims. Can the Minister of Justice tell us more about the legislation we have introduced in order to protect Canadians and to empower victims?
Honorable Ministre de la Justice.
The Honourable Minister for Justice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague from Vancouver Granville for his question and for having asked it in French. We recently introduced Bill S-12 in the Senate. The bill aims to strengthen the National Sex Offender Registry. They will have to register unless they can prove that they are not a risk to public safety. S-12 also gives victims more choices, Mr. Speaker, more choices about publication bans by making the process clearer. Some victims want to protect their identity, others want to tell their story. The choice should be theirs.
Of the opposition.
The Prime Minister wants us to believe that the Beijing dictatorship paid $140,000 to the Trudeau Foundation to influence him, but that he didn't know about it, even though it was his own brother who facilitated the payment. He wants us to believe that donors to the Trudeau Foundation paid for his vacation, but that he didn't know about it. He wants us to believe that for 2 years, intelligence agents knew that a member of parliament and his family were being intimidated, but that he didn't know about it. If the Prime Minister doesn't know anything about anything, then how can he protect us? The Honourable Government Leader in the House. Well, Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister has confirmed on many occasions, he has no ties to the Trudeau Foundation. The Trudeau Foundation grants scholarships for studies. It is irresponsible to attack an organization, a charity organization, to attack it with partisanship attacks, Mr. Speaker. And there is no indication that there is a relationship between the Prime Minister and the Foundation. There is no connection. If the member across the way has a question for the Foundation, they should ask the question to the Foundation. The Honourable Opposition Leader.
On which we all now agree. We all agree that a foreign dictatorship had an agent organize threats against the family of an MP because of how he voted in the House. We all agree on that. We all agree that the government knew about this 2 years ago. We all agree, whether we like it or not, that the Prime Minister is the head of government. In other words, he is responsible for the action or inaction of his own government. In other words, he should have known and he should have taken action. When will he finally show up for work, take responsibility, and do his job?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
That is precisely what this government has been doing since we took the reins of government in 2015. We have put in place the authorities, the personnel, and all of the technology to protect our institutions from foreign interference. We'll continue to work with the members opposite, despite all of the chicanery, despite all of the lobs of insults, despite all of the distraction, despite their incompetence of 10 years when they had the opportunity to do this work. We're doing this work, and we will do it regardless of partisanship to make sure that all of the MPs in this chamber can do their job.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This is actually not about one member of Parliament. This is not about all members of Parliament. This is about millions of patriotic Canadians of Chinese descent who face this kind of abuse and harassment every single day. We hear stories of Chinese Canadians in tears because they are being intimidated by agents just like the one that attacked this member's family. These are our people. This is our home. When will the Prime Minister finally do his job and protect us?
The Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it's finally some measure of relief to see that the Conservative leader, who for weeks and months has been trying to politicize an issue that indeed not only touches all of the members in this chamber, but indeed all Canadians. And one can only hope now that they will abandon their hopped-up rhetoric, their counterproductive insults, and work with the government to protect all members and all Canadians from foreign interference. That is our sworn obligation. We will continue to do that to defend our democracy.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Mr. Speaker, while the Leader of the official opposition blames local mayors and councillors for a lack of housing supply, our government has taken a different approach. Can the Minister of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion inform this House as to the level
As important as it is to hear the answers, I'd like to hear the questions as well. The Honourable Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek, please, from the top.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the Leader of the official opposition blames local mayors and councillors for a lack of housing supply, our government has taken a different approach. Can the Minister of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion inform this House as to the level of support our Housing Accelerator Fund will provide to municipalities who expedite the planning and approval process for new developments that increase housing supply for all Canadians?
Great question. Well, Minister of Housing.
That's a great question. I want to
thank the honourable member for his attention to this important issue. To get more housing supply built, we need everyone at the table. Conservatives just aren't serious about this. They want to pick fights with mayors and cut funding to cities. Just yesterday, the leader of the official opposition stood in this House and he attacked what he called Canada's walk mayors.
Some noise in the chamber that is really making it difficult for people to understand or hear his answer. I'll have him start right from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honourable member for his important question and his attention to this important issue. We know on this side of the House that to get more housing supply built, we need everyone at the table. But the Conservatives are not serious about this. Just yesterday, the leader of the official opposition picked fights with mayors and cut funding to cities. Yesterday, he stood in the House and attacked what he called Canada's walk mayors. And Conservative cuts and that type of far-right rhetoric will not build one affordable housing unit, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the Conservatives, we know that we need to work with municipalities to get more.
The Honourable Member for Rosemont, La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, Quebec is on high alert. Rivers are above major flood threshold levels across the province. Families have had to evacuate their homes. In Charlevoix, 2 firefighters were swept away by the waters of the Rivière du Gouffre while trying to rescue a family whose home was in danger of being swept away. The body of one of these firefighters has been found. Our thoughts are with their families, as well as with the hundreds of Quebecers who are affected by these floods. Will the federal government deploy all of the necessary resources and support to help Quebecers affected by this disaster?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank the member from Rosemont, La Petite Patrie, for a very important question. And I want to join him, as I believe every member of this House, in expressing our concern and our thoughts for all of the communities of Quebec that have impacted. And in particular, we would all extend our sincere condolences to the families of Christopher and Regis Lavoie, the firefighters who rushed to save lives and appear to have lost their life. Mr. Speaker, we immediately deployed Canadian Air Force aircraft to search and engage in the initial search, and I've reached out to Mr. Bonnadel of the Quebec government, first of all, to offer all federal support as required and to assure him that our government will be there for the people of Quebec.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again, condolences to people and the loss of those firefighters in these climate events. My question is to the Prime Minister in relation to the business that we'll take up later today, amendments to the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, known as S5. There is still time to improve this act, to increase the opportunities for public participation, for science and Indigenous knowledge to inform the act. The amendments by the Honourable Member for Burnaby, for New Westminster Burnaby, and myself need to be supported by this government. Will they stand for public participation and Indigenous knowledge?
L'Honorable, the Honourable Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Member for her question. The last time CEPA was reformed was more than 20 years ago, and what our government did was introduce strong amendment to CEPA, which were in fact applauded by both environmental organizations, scientists, and industry alike. The parliamentary process was a clear success. Both Senate and the House committees worked on this bill, spent 50 years studying it, heard testimony from over 80 witnesses representing civil society, academia, industry, and Indigenous organizations, and we received more than 100 written briefs. It's now time, Mr. Speaker, to pass the bill as reported by the Environment Committee, and we need to send it back to the Senate. Thank you very much.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for question period today. We have a point of order. The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday in question period, the Minister of Housing claimed that I had praised the Housing Accelerator program, so I did review the 479 interventions I've made on Hansard here and in committee, and I've been consistent in claiming the government has been inadequate in their approach to affordable housing. I just wanted to correct the record.
It being 3:22, pursuant to order made on June 23rd, 2022, the House will now proceed to a recorded division on the motion of Mr. Poiliev regarding business of supply.
La question est la suivante.
The question is the following.
That given that after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister's inflammatory policies, may I dispense? No? 1, inflation has reached a 40-year high and is forcing Canadians to cut back on the basic necessities of eating and heating their homes. 2, les coûts hypothécaires.
2, monthly mortgage costs have more than doubled since 2015 and now cost Canadians an average of $3,000 per month.
Statistics Canada reports that mortgage interest costs rose at a faster rate in March, plus 26.4%. This was the largest yearly increase on record as